tell you a little bit more about myself. I am a registered dietitian. I worked in healthcare for many, many years before deciding to work with the public. And so through Extension, I'm able to do community programming and reach larger groups, and I don't have to worry about insurance, and I don't have to worry about limited number of times I can see people. And so for me, this is really exciting because a lot of times my classes are a good solid 2 hours, sometimes longer, depending upon the group. So we can really get a feel for who we are and what we're going to be talking about. So I'll give you just a few more seconds on that poll, and then we'll go ahead, and it looks like our poll is closed. So, all right. So what are we going to be talking about today? Well, we're going to talk about why we eat. We don't necessarily always eat because we're hungry. And when we are hungry, you know, we have physical hunger and we have non-physical hunger. And I mean, if people really stop and think about it, many people don't realize there's different types of hunger. We're also going to define some terms like appetite and satiety. And we're also going to be talking about stress and the body's response to stress. We're going to talk about the good and bad stress. We're going to talk about the stress hormone cortisol, as well as talking about having positive stress management techniques in your life, because that's incredibly important. And then we're going to talk about hunger hormones and emotional eating. So my question for you is, do you ever open that refrigerator door and just stand there looking for something? And, or maybe it's not the refrigerator, maybe it's the pantry door. And you're thinking, okay, I just ate not that long ago. Am I really hungry? What am I looking for? So keep in mind that although you may be looking for food, the reality is you might be looking for something very different. And so there's a lot of different reasons that we eat. And so let's look at some of those reasons. So most people think, oh, we eat because we're hungry, but really there's many different factors that influence our desire for food intake. We have biological factors, sociological, behavioral factors, and most people are truly striving to be the best them. They're making healthy food choices. However, sometimes things get out of balance, and sometimes we are just, we find ourselves reaching for foods that we know we shouldn't have, but we still want anyway. And so although food is an essential part for survival, not all food is created equal, and not all reasons for eating are going to be equal. And again, a lot of times we may find ourselves eating because we're hungry, but maybe we're not hungry for what truly will nourish our body. So we have to keep that in mind. So again, if we're talking about hunger, a lot of times people think about physical hunger. And hunger is our normal sensation that makes us want to eat. It's a process in which your body tells your brain that your stomach is empty and that it needs nourishment. Physical hunger often is going to develop gradually over time, and it often occurs several hours after eating a meal, and it's going to be accompanied by physical symptoms. So these symptoms are going to vary depending upon individuals and maybe depending upon how hungry you are. But they may be physical hunger pains. Your stomach might start growling and making noises. You might find that you have difficulty concentrating, that you just kind of feel sluggish, or maybe you are becoming irritable and hangry because it's just been too long and you just haven't had anything to eat. When individuals are truly physically hungry, they often feel satisfaction after eating. And so that's really something that's important to understand. But when you think about eating and hunger, and you are thinking about, okay, well, if I eat and not that long ago, why am I hungry again? Well, hunger is a very complex process. and there's many biological factors at play. The true driving force behind what makes you want to eat is fairly complex, and it's an interaction between your body and your brain. And again, as I mentioned earlier, there's many factors at play. The hypothalamus is is responsible for maintaining our body's internal balance. This means it helps control many different processes, which includes our food and water intake, as well as our body temperature. When our stomachs are empty, it will cause, our stomachs will start to contract, and that causes us to have hunger pains. And when that stomach is contracting, it's going to secrete chemical messengers, and those messengers are going to travel up to our brain, and the brain's going to receive a signal, and it's going to say, feed me, feed me. Other things that can happen is that our blood sugar levels can drop. And then the pancreas and the liver, they get excited and they're like, hey, we need to send some additional chemicals too because we're hungry, we need food. So again, it's a very complex process that hunger is. And so a lot of things can go wrong because there are so many different factors at play. And then we have those hunger hormones, our leptin and our ghrelin, and we'll talk a little bit more about those as we go through our presentation today. So non-physical hunger. Non-physical hunger tends to come on very quickly, and often it's not going to be related to whether or not we just had a meal, and it can actually persist for quite a long time after we've actually been full. So maybe like you're stuffed, you just had a really nice dinner for Thanksgiving, and then all of a sudden your spouse brings out dessert and you're like, oh, I'm really stuffed, but I still have room for that dessert. And so a lot of times our non-physical hunger can be in part driven by other factors other than being hungry. It can be driven by our feelings, it can be driven by our mood, our stress. But that non-physical hunger, when we engage in it, what can end up happening? We can have uncontrollable or mindless eating when you sit down and you realize, wow, who ate all those jelly beans? I just don't know what happened to them. And then after the fact, you can have feelings of shame or guilt because maybe you were going to start your healthy eating plan on Monday, but Sunday was Easter and now you have all these jelly beans to eat. So again, it's really complicated and there's a lot of factors at play, and understanding those factors are going to help you be more successful. So let's go ahead and define a couple different terms. So hunger, we know that hunger is a physical response, and the difference between hunger and appetite is that hunger, again, is that physical response versus appetite is a psychological response. It's a desire to eat, and there may be very strong cravings. The other terms that I want to just briefly touch on is satiety and satiation. And I throw these out because when I worked in healthcare, a lot of times I was dealing with very critically ill individuals. And I also dealt with a lot of individuals that were recovering from conditions like stroke, maybe they were had other neurological processes going on. And so they may not have had an appetite. And if you've ever worked with an individual trying to convince them that you understand they're not hungry because they don't have an appetite, but they really need to eat because their body needs those nutrients, it can be a really big challenge. And the other thing that can happen, because satiety is having that sense of fullness and satiation is that feeling or condition of being full. But sometimes when you have maybe a stroke or some other type of neurological or disease process going on, you may find individuals having maybe 4 ounces of fluid, and then they're like, oh, I'm just full, I just can't take anymore. And so there are other factors at play. So know that hunger and appetite are different. And that feeling of fullness and a condition of being full, those are all different factors. And when you're talking about reaching healthy weights and understanding hunger and understanding how our body needs and utilizes nutrients, those are things that you really should have some insight in, if nothing else, a simple awareness of. Now we're going to talk about the stress response. So let's face it, if you're alive, you have stress in your life, which isn't bad, because stress is a natural response to both physical and mental reactions, and that can be either good or bad. And it's those experiences again, those experiences can be beneficial or harmful to your health and safety. And that's very important when you look at how you're dealing with it. So during the stress response, our body our body releases a flood of hormones. Two hormones known as our stress hormones are adrenaline and cortisol. And the issue with these hormones is that they can be very beneficial. They can give you, they can help to protect you by giving you focused energy, help you be alert. So if there's like a dinosaur chasing you, you can run really fast to get away from it, right? However, time has evolved. And so in today's modern world, our bodies have a real difficult time distinguishing the difference between the stress of normal everyday life and life-threatening stressors. So we don't have dinosaurs chasing us anymore, but maybe we have crazy traffic we have to sit in. Well, maybe not so much right now, since a lot of us are working remotely. However, you may still have to deal with other stressful events, like waiting 15 minutes to get through the checkout line at the grocery store. So it's very important that we understand that during stressful times, our body has a response, and it's releasing hormones. And we're going to talk about the stress hormone cortisol in a few more slides, a little bit more in depth. So let's first talk about how stress affects us. Stress can affect all aspects of our lives, from our physical health to our emotional health. And how we deal with that stress is seen within our behaviors. And so it's important that we adapt healthful behaviors to help us deal with these stressful events. So stress, we can develop headaches, we can have difficulty sleeping, we can end up having muscle tension, we can have unintentional weight gain or loss for some individuals. Stress can affect our mood. It can cause us to feel very anxious or restless. It can cause us to be very irritable and short-tempered. It can also contribute to a sense of sadness and a sense of depression, because we don't necessarily have any control over a particular situation, or maybe even an individual. If you have a loved one that you care about and they're making poor choices, that can add a lot of stress to your life. And that stress and how we react to it, how we behave because of it, will impact not only our body, not only our mood, but also our behaviors. It can contribute to decreased work productivity. It can cause us to withdraw socially, or maybe even develop a substance abuse or use that maybe you never had before. But I mentioned earlier that there's both good stress and bad stress. So good stress or positive stress is called eustress. And this is a type of stress that really gets us excited. And it often motivates us and helps us to focus our energy and improves our performance. This stress often leaves us feeling excited and can help us cope with items in the short term. So buying a house, super exciting, how wonderful. But depending upon how you look at it, you might be thinking, oh, well, now I have to move, I have to paint, I have to hang pictures on the walls. And by show of hands, how many people moved into their first home and it took them months to hang up pictures because it was too stressful to figure out, oh no, where am I going to hang the pictures? Do I really want that there forever? Right. So it can be very stressful depending upon how you look at it. So again, these are typical things that can be positive stresses, but they could also be seen as a negative stress or distress. So in contrast, distress can cause us to have anxiety or concern. And it can either be a short-term stress or it can be long-term in nature. And it's generally perceived as being something outside our ability to cope with it. So, you know, our current situation with the coronavirus, that is something that is outside of our control. We're not able to control the duration of the event. And there's so many factors that we just can't control. So how we deal with that can then contribute to our negative stress or our distress. So some people might be at home and they're just stress eating. I have seen so many memes on Facebook about people just talking about how, like, oh no, I ate all of my emergency food snacks in like a day or two. Again, how many people can relate to that? How many people can see or have heard of friends that are just stress eating? On the flip side, I have to say that I have some friends that have shared that since they're not eating takeout as much and they're cooking from scratch, they have actually lost weight. And I'm just so impressed with them. I think that's wonderful. And I hope that you are all having similar stories to share. All right, so remember I mentioned cortisol earlier? So cortisol is your body's main stress hormone, and it works with certain parts of your brain to control your mood, your motivation, and your fear. And cortisol is the hormone that's released by your adrenal glands during times of stress. And if you have times of prolonged persistent stress, those adrenal glands can release really high amounts of cortisol. And this cortisol can increase your appetite. Isn't that terrible? Like, you're already stressed. Why do you want to eat more? Well, there may be a biological reason behind it. It's a stress hormone that's contributing to your desire to want to eat. Additionally, stress also seems to affect our food preferences. There's numerous studies, now granted they're in animals, but these studies have shown that physical or emotional distress increases the intake of foods that are high in fat and sugar, and often both. And so high cortisol levels in combination with high insulin levels may be responsible for our additional weight gain that we have when we are turning to food during stressful events. So now, that doesn't mean I'm giving you permission to say, hey, I'm stressed, I can go out and eat whatever I want. Nope, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying you are here and you're being educated and you're learning awareness. And so now you're gonna have the tools to go and help address some of those issues. So again, it's really important that you take the time to identify stress. What does it look like in your life? Everyone's going to have a different response to that. But effective stress management starts with identifying your own personal stresses and developing your own personal strategy to manage that. What makes you feel stressed? And then what is within your control? Can you do things that are within your control to help decrease some of that stress within your life? Because just adapting and making small changes can really have a big impact. And sometimes people don't necessarily realize that. And so what can I do? Or what do I do when I'm stressed? I want you to really take some time and think about that. just joking. This is a webinar. We have to keep moving along. Remember, my classes are usually 2 hours long, but you can think about that afterwards. We're just going to keep moving along. It's important that when you're experiencing stress, that you develop healthy stress management techniques. Because all too often people end up self-medicating and they turn to unhealthy behaviors in an attempt to relieve some of that pressure they're feeling from stress. And they can do it in a variety of ways. Sometimes they withdraw and they just do literally nothing. Or maybe they sleep and they're sleeping too much. Maybe they're turning to food and just making a lot of unhealthy food choices. And I know half of you are thinking right now, it's the cortisol that made him do it, right? Sometimes people are going to eat too much while others not enough. And some people might turn to other activities like gambling, shopping, overspending. Maybe they're going to lash out to their friends and family when they wouldn't normally do such things. So really it's important to identify what your stress is so that you can develop or identify your stress and then identify how you react to it, and then identify effective ways that you can manage that. Because if you're having a stressful day, it's really not fair to your friends and loved ones to take that frustration out on them. So it's important that we all develop a positive stress management process and effective stress management. One way to do that is to make a list of situations and recognize what causes it, what those situations are. That's going to allow us to set boundaries. It's going to help us to control our environment and to evaluate our schedules. And just simply reframing things, finding ways to look at things differently. And so, for example, yes, maybe you're working remotely, but as one coworker told me, I actually don't mind it because I can flex my hours a little bit and I can maybe go for a walk when it's nice out versus maybe when they were in the office setting, they weren't able to do that. So again, finding the silver lining within a rain cloud, or knowing that without rain clouds, we wouldn't have the daffodils and the tulips that are hopefully starting to come our way. So there's a whole host of activities that you can do in order to help manage that stress. And we're all different. So maybe cleaning helps you manage your stress, but maybe someone else just going for a walk and being out in nature is a good way to manage that. So health behaviors are actions taken to maintain, attain, or regain good health and to prevent illness. And again, I've been talking a lot about different strategies that you can adapt when you're dealing with those stressful events. And if you are able to, find that balance and balance your physical activity, your social interactions, whether it's social interactions and you're doing Skype or phone calls or other types of ways that you can interact and still have that need met in a similar way versus turning to food and making unhealthy food choices. And these health behaviors, they can be in the short term. Ideally, we want them to be in the long term. When you adapt positive health behaviors, that is going to contribute to a healthy lifestyle, essentially a way of life. And that will ultimately improve your long-term health outcomes. It's going to decrease your risk of heart disease, diabetes, and other issues that are commonly associated with individuals that are struggling to maintain a healthy body weight. All right. Now we're going to talk about hunger hormones. Yes, they do exist. And no, what I'm going to tell you isn't, I'm not going to give you an excuse just to say, well, I can't help myself. It's my hormones. So the reason I'm sharing this information is because I want you to understand, in order to better deal with your weight, your emotional issues, the choices that you're making, is that by understanding them, you'll know, okay, this is something serious and this is something I'm really going to have to work hard at. So let's take a look at what they are and what they do. Our first hormone that we're going to talk about is leptin. And the main function of leptin is to regulate the amount of body fat by inhibiting our appetite and our food intake. So leptin is our satiety hormone. And what that means is that it's the hormone that's going to signal our brain to stop eating. And interesting, leptin levels are going to fluctuate based on the percent body fat mass that you have. And this is because leptin is made by your fat cells. Who knew those little things were doing things, are active and busy and not just making us frustrated, right? But here is a thing that I just think, well, that's not fair, but it's the reality of life. It's biology. So when you lose weight, your leptin levels are going to drop. And with less leptin, so less appetite suppressing hormone, that is often going to end up making you feel hungrier. And it's going to make you want to eat more. Again, this is not fair, I tell you. So potentially then this can cause you to gain the weight back that you lost. And so your brain, the reason for that is because your brain's interpreting it as, hey, I'm not getting enough to eat. Feed me, feed me. But the reality is you have to really just be aware of it and work to address any leptin resistance issues. And so leptin resistance is when our body doesn't recognize the signal to stop eating. And unfortunately, people who are obese, meaning that they have a high BMI, they are generally going to have a higher percentage of body fat mass, meaning they have more fat cells. And because those fat cells are producing leptin in proportion to their size, it can actually be much more difficult to have to then lose weight because you have those hormones going against you. Again, this isn't permission to say like, oh, I can't help myself, it's my hormones. It's permission to help you gain understanding and knowing that your battle and your struggle is real. And it just simply means you're going to have to work that much harder in maintaining that healthy body weight. All right. Ghrelin. Ghrelin is the other hunger hormone that we're going to talk about. Ghrelin, on the other hand, is a hormone that tells you when you're hungry and when you need to eat. So think of it as a gremlin making your stomach growl or grumble. And ghrelin is primarily made in the stomach, and it's released when you haven't eaten for a while. Remember earlier I said one of the physiological signs of hunger is that your stomach is going to contract and it's going to make gurgling sounds. Well, during that process, ghrelin is being released and it's saying, hey, I haven't eaten for a while. And then it's going to send a message to the brain indicating like, hey, I need to be fed. And typically ghrelin is going to peak about every 4 hours or so. And this is going to correspond with our typical eating patterns. So when we're eating breakfast, lunch, and dinner, generally speaking. Now, this hormone increases your appetite, and it also plays a role in body weight. However, the exact role of ghrelin in the pathophysiology or the mechanism of obesity is still under investigation. So that just simply means we need to do more research. However, in a number of studies, it's been reported that after eating, there is less of a decline of our ghrelin in obese individuals. And again, there is less of a decline in obese individuals compared to that of normal body mass index. So individuals that are heavier and have a higher BMI, it's going to be less noticeable. And this is responsible. This is a reasonable and this is a reasonable point to make, because then that explains why some individuals that have higher BMIs after eating a large meal may still feel hungry. Now, again, more research is definitely needed. And so we'll just have to kind of wait and see. But again, you can see the issues when you take leptin into play and it's not getting the message to your brain saying, hey, I need to stop eating. Or if you have ghrelin and it's also not doing what it's supposed to be doing because that message isn't being received to the brain, and it's saying like, hey, I need to eat more. So you can see how this whole hunger issue is very complex. But again, you're here today, you're learning about this, so now you'll have the skills and knowledge to go and explore more and see how it truly is impacting you, so that you can do things to better cope with the stress and the eating and the issues that you're dealing with in your life. So far we've talked about hunger and the need to eat and how it's super complex. We've also talked briefly about stress and how both good and bad stress impacts our health, both in the short term and long term. And we've talked about some of those crazy hormones that make our life complicated, like our cortisol, our ghrelin, and our leptin. And now what we're going to be talking about is learning some new skills. And maybe these aren't even new skills, but maybe they're skills that you just need to be reminded about. Skills that you just need to say, okay, this is serious stuff. Let's go ahead, back to the drawing board, and let's begin a new challenge on a new day with new information. Because we want to maintain a healthy body weight so that we can have just the wonderful life that we've been dreaming about. So again, we don't always eat to satisfy hunger. Many of us are going to turn to food for comfort, stress relief. Maybe we want to reward ourselves or to celebrate. And what we end up doing is using food as a coping mechanism. And what we need to do is we need to recognize our body's reaction to stressors. And we need to change our emotional response. So if we have a stressful event, we need to pause. We have to evaluate how are we going to react or interact with that stressful event. And then what behavior are we going to adapt? What action are we going to take? And so maybe for now, our event is something stressful. Our reaction is, oh, I'm going to go eat ice cream. And then our behavior is, I'm still going to eat ice cream. Versus like our event, with these new tools and insight, we can adapt it so that we can implement new strategies. Because the problem when soothing with food occurs because that good feeling may only last for a short time, and it may make matters worse. If you're diabetic and you are using ice cream to make yourself feel better, that ice cream can significantly impact your blood sugars. Even if you're not diabetic and you're dealing with weight issues, those extra calories, those extra sugars that are added to the ice cream can really set you up to be pre-diabetic. And that's an issue that is really an epidemic with prediabetes across our nation. And we really need to be more proactive in addressing those issues. Also, when we're feeding our feelings with food, we're missing out on the unique tastes and textures that we can experience while eating that food. I have some friends who say I only eat 3 bites because after the 3rd bite, you don't have the same feeling that you do from the first couple bites of eating something that's delicious, maybe a delicious cheesecake. Also, when you're soothing with food, you are contributing to an emotional cycle. And we're going to talk about that in the next slide here. But what we need to do, we need to look at our hunger scale, our fullness scale, and we need to check in with our body and we need to check in with our brain, and we need to see, are they lining up, or is our brain or our emotions deceiving our body? All right, our emotional eating cycle, what can end up happening is we have a stressful event, something upsetting occurs, or maybe we feel uncomfortable. And then we feel a need for comfort. So we're gonna seek out escape or seek comfort within that event. And maybe, again, this is emotional eating, we're going to then have a desire to eat. Then we're going to go ahead and eat. Maybe we overeat, and then we're going to feel a temporary sense of relief. And then that is often accompanied by feelings of guilt and shame. And then that guilt and shame contributes to the stress cycle. And you can see that it can just very quickly spiral out of control. So it's important that we're able to identify our emotional triggers. Stress affects us all, and we experience it differently, and we experience it at different times throughout the day. So it's important that we're able to identify those. Maybe we have relationship conflicts. Maybe we have some underlying anger or insecurities or loneliness that we have to work through. Maybe there are work stressors, or maybe a stressor could be that you're just bored or you're feeling fatigued, but that's your body's response to stress. And so finding a way to address that. Because who knew boredom could be a stressor? It really is. It really, really is. We could have financial pressures. And again, not everyone has the ability to work remotely. So if you are at home and not getting a paycheck at this time, that's a very, very stressful situation. And of course, you could have health problems, whether yourself or a loved one could be dealing with health issues. So there are a number of triggers, and it's during that pause. Remember, we have a stressful event. We have to take that pause. During that pause, we're going to be figuring out, is this a stressful event for me? What am I going to do? And then you're going to go ahead and then implement a behavior. So alternatives to emotional eating can be varied, but really we need to work to identify alternative methods when dealing with stress to prevent emotional eating. Effective stress management is going to help you break the hold that stress has on your life so that you can be happier and healthier and more productive. But I'm going to tell you this right now, it's not going to be easy. So if you thought you were going to come to the webinar today and think, oh, this is going to be awesome, I'm going to learn amazing things, and you are learning amazing things, but now you're going to have to implement them into your own life, and it's not necessarily going to be easy. So just keep that in mind, but don't be discouraged by it. So your goal is to develop healthy coping strategies. You might go ahead and keep a food diary and journal. I think this is really interesting because research has told us that individuals that track what they eat are going to be much more likely to lose weight and maintain that weight loss. And essentially, you're holding yourself accountable when you are keeping a food diary or journal. There are lots of online trackers that are free that you can use to track your food intake. And it's really awesome because whether you're using a free version or a paid version, they really have a lot of cool things that'll break down your sodium intake, your total fat intake, calories, total calories consumed versus calories that you spent engaging in physical activity. But the other thing that you may want to consider is recording the time that you eat and the emotion that you're feeling before you eat and or after. And I say that because maybe you do good all day. You're on track, you're eating what you're supposed to be doing, or you're eating what you're supposed to be eating, but come 8 o'clock, 8:30, all of a sudden that refrigerator is calling you and you're just eating another big bowl of ice cream. The other thing is, again, by tracking your behaviors, not only tracking your food intake and how you feel about that, it's going to give you insight. It's going to give you insight so you can distinguish patterns. It's going to give you insight in your feelings. Like, how come when I hang out with so-and-so, I have these feelings, and then that makes me want to go home and eat ice cream or cheesecake. So if anyone listens to any of my webinars, I always try to work ice cream into my presentations because I love ice cream. So a little side note. All right, so mindful eating. So talking about those alternative methods to manage emotional eating brings us to mindful eating. And mindful eating is a practice that helps us develop awareness of your eating habits. By developing this awareness, you're going to gain a lot of understanding about your body and what it's telling us. Because you have to answer questions like, am I really hungry? Or am I tired? Am I thirsty? Am I feeling overwhelmed? Do I just need to get out and exercise? Do I just need to go to bed? Other things that mindful eating helps is it helps you to connect the relationship between your emotions and your dietary intake. So it can give you insight into what you eat, why you eat, when you eat, how much you eat. So mindful eating, these are the general questions that you're going to want to ask yourself. Again, why do I eat? When am I eating? Do I eat only at between 8:30 and 10 o'clock at night? But then I find out I consume 2,000 calories. What am I eating and how am I eating it? Am I eating it in secret? Maybe your spouse is at home, you feel ignored, you feel frustrated because you've been dealing with kiddos all day, and then you go into the office and after the kids are in bed and you curl up with a nice bowl of ice cream and watch a movie versus going and talking with your spouse and sharing and talking about your feelings and how things are going in life and how you're dealing with things, or calling a friend on the phone and doing a similar activity of just talking through those emotions. All right, some meaningful tips that I want to offer you, some mealtime tips. So again, being very mindful when you are eating and asking yourself those questions that we mentioned in our last slide, but also, avoiding second helpings. Check in with your body before you just go and have another round of food. Use high-fat condiments sparingly because they can be a way that a lot of unintended calories are going to creep up, whether it's because they have added sugars or added fat contents to them. When you have desserts, share them with someone or have a smaller portion, or instead have fruit. And so maybe that is just one simple thing. You're like, oh, I love dessert, but your idea of dessert is something that's going to be generally higher in fat, higher in sugar. But changing your mindset, changing your behaviors so that you can say, okay, so instead of having dessert every single night, I am just going to have dessert 5 nights a week, and the other 2 nights I'm going to have dessert or fruit for dessert. Again, changing the way you look at things and adapting behaviors that may seem small in the beginning, but over time, they're going to have a significant impact on your overall health. Really working to consume adequate amounts of fruits and vegetables. Unfortunately, adults in America are not the majority of adults are not consuming the recommended amounts of fruits and vegetables on a daily basis. Selecting low-fat dairy products and including plant-based proteins. The reason we tell you to include plant-based proteins is because when you're getting your protein via plants, whether it be beans, legumes, nuts, seeds, all of those different things, generally speaking, they're going to be lower in saturated fat and lower in cholesterol. So that is something that is very important because fat is going to have more calories compared to protein and carbohydrates. Also be mindful of what you eat and how much you're eating. Use all of your senses. Use your taste, pay attention to the texture, the smell. Make sure that you're eating sensibly throughout the day, and that can help you so you don't overeat in the evenings. Avoid opportunities where you're engaging in mindless eating. So if you like to watch TV and eat a bag of potato chips, and you're like, wait, where'd the bag of potato chips go? Just putting it in a single serving bowl and then taking that for a snack, or again, just limiting the number of times that you're going to have those potato chips around. And then of course, incorporating fruits and vegetables whenever possible. So instead of always having potato chips, maybe incorporate a few pita chips, but then also cutting up some fresh vegetables and having cucumbers and peppers and carrots with hummus and pita chips in place of those potato or corn chips. All right, so what's gonna work for you? At the end of the day, it's really going to depend on you. We could brainstorm ideas. I can offer suggestions. Make sure you're checking your hunger. Make sure you have support. Stay away from temptation. Acknowledge there's going to be setbacks. Find ways to alleviate boredom. But ultimately, it's just going to come down to what is going to work for you. There is no magic bullet. And only you can answer these questions. What I can tell you, again, it's not going to be easy. And life is beautifully complicated and complex. And thus we need to embrace the knowledge that you've learned today, and then take that knowledge and evaluate your life and see what things in your life you can change, what aspects of your lifestyle you need to go back to the drawing board and try again, and continue to work on your progress. Keep in mind, all of these habits that you've developed have been over the course of your lifetime. And so if it took you a lifetime to get to where you are, it's going to take you the rest of your life to help you to strive to reach those health goals. And it's going to be through trial and error. Maybe this will work for, this year and next, but then maybe a couple years down the road, that's not working. You have to go back and try something different. And just because, again, those stress hormones and those hunger hormones seem to be working against you, that's not going to give you a free pass to give up. You have to continue on with your wellness journey, and it's going to help you reach that quality of life that you desire. So brainstorm ideas that are going to work for you and just keep at it. All right, we are getting really close to the end of our time today. So did we cover everything? We talked about why we eat. We talked about hunger. We defined some terms. We talked about stress. We talked about our hunger hormones, emotional eating. I offered some alternatives. So I think we got everything. So any questions?
Hi, Diane. This is Laura. I asked folks to put questions in the chat. I don't see anything right now. There was a little dialogue going about the term pre-diabetes, and I did check on the American Diabetes Association website, and it is described there.
All right. Thank you so much, Laura. All right, well, if we don't have any questions, I just want to share that health is an accumulation of small choices that we make on a daily basis. And we really need to be mindful of each and every choice, because it is those choices that will have a lasting impact on our overall health. And so my question is, what direction are you going to choose? And where are you going to go on your journey?
Diane?
Yeah?
Oh, is that Kelly? Were you going to ask a question that you put in the chat?
Laura,
Kelly,
oh, go ahead.
Kelly Rich has the question, does emotional eating affect men as much as women?
Yes, emotions, whether or not it affects men or women, the same, I cannot speak to that, but I can speak to the fact that we all experience emotions. We're all human, and it can affect men um, just as much as women. Now, yeah, so it can affect men and women equally.
And I think of the difference between like men's comfort food and women's comfort food. Like when I think of men, I think of like bacon and steak and very, pizza rich kind of foods. And then women, I think of like ice cream and chocolate just by, the men and women that I know. I can't say I've seen like research on it, but just seeing what comforts men at church breakfast, they have like bacon feasts and such like that. So that's kind of, those are my thoughts on it. And then Stacy says, you said insulin was also a hunger hormone, but didn't go further. Anything we should know outside of the whole diabetes thing? Could you
So
go ahead, Diane?
I was just going to say that again, there are, hunger is a very complex process. And I just touched on some of the key hormones of ghrelin and leptin. And yes, insulin and insulin resistance do play a role in hunger. However, that's not something we're going to discuss in today's webinar.
Did that help clarify, Stacy? She said yes.
All right, thank you. All right, so I just want to take this time to also share with you that we have an awesome program, and it's a program that we offer called Extending Wellness. And you can sign up for wellness tips, and it includes information on healthy eating, finances, and family issues. And what you do is you'll receive a text no more than twice a week. And we're not going to share your number because we wouldn't want our number shared. And you can stop at any time. And it just sends a little nudge, a little information on helping you make good choices within your life. And of course, it's going to be research-based, and it's going to be coming directly from our campus. So please consider signing up for that. We would love to have you join us. And I also am super excited because next week, Laura and Jenna Smith are going to be talking about the science behind popular eating trends. And I helped write this lesson, and it's going to be very exciting. Next Wednesday, April 22nd, from 1 to 2 p.m. And we would love to have you join us. After today's webinar, you're all going to receive an email. In that email, we are going to ask that you answer a quick Qualtrics link survey. And the Qualtrics survey is very short. And then after you complete your survey, then we'll send you some resources that we talked about in today's lesson. So we would, again, love to have you join us next week. I would love for you to respond to the Qualtrics evaluation. And any other questions?
Yes, Diane. I know this is being recorded. How can folks access the recording to revisit the webinar?
Right, so the webinar is being recorded, and it will be uploaded to the University of Illinois Extension YouTube channel at some point. However, there is a delay, and so we're hoping to have things up within 7 to 10 business days after the webinar has occurred. So again, hopefully in the next 7 to 10 business days, depending upon how quickly support staff are able to get everything uploaded. And so I kind of gave us a little bit of a cushion. You can also check out the University of Illinois Extension website, and they have a whole list of other upcoming webinars. Maybe you're interested in hemp production. Maybe you're interested in gardening. And so they have lots of valuable resources, and I can send that link out when I send the email out about the Qualtrics as well. All right, well, thank you so much for joining us today. Laura, thank you for being our moderator, and I hope you all have a wonderful week, and I hope that this information will help you on your wellness journey. Take care, and we'll talk soon. Bye.
Have you ever noticed your breath? Specifically, how your breath moves in and out of your body. Most of the time, we pay no attention to our breathing, but it's one of the most basic elements to help calm a busy mind. Hi, my name is Carla Belzer, and I'm a family life educator with the University of Illinois Extension. In today's moment for mental health, we're going to talk about deep breathing as an important part of a self-care routine. Mindfulness is the ability to be fully aware of the present moment, and it helps us be less reactive and overwhelmed by our current situation or surroundings. And while mindfulness can be practiced and experienced in many different ways, one of the most basic mindfulness practices is deep breathing. When we breathe normally, we generally take shallow breaths. And when we're stressed or anxious, this shallow breathing can actually enhance or make our symptoms worse. By engaging in deep breathing or belly breathing, we breathe deeper into the lungs, which allows us to take in more oxygen. And as we do this, we experience something called a full oxygen exchange, which helps us slow down our heart rate. It lowers our blood pressure, and it calms both our mind and our body. So deep breathing is a really easy way to practice mindfulness. To start, first, you probably need to find a quiet place to sit where you won't be distracted. And while deep breathing exercises can be practiced anywhere, you might be more comfortable completing this practice seated in a chair with your feet firmly planted on the floor. If you're comfortable and if you're able, you can get down on the floor and sit in a lotus style position. Choose a position that works for you. And you may want to experience this practice with your eyes closed. However, if you're not comfortable closing your eyes, feel free just to hold a soft gaze on the floor or on something in your environment. Once you're in a comfortable position, turn your attention to your breath as you inhale through your nose and exhale through your mouth. And as you're doing this, simply observe your breath. Don't try to adjust it. Don't try to change it. Just quietly notice your breath. It may be helpful to notice where you notice your breath in your body. You may notice how your abdomen rises and falls, or how your chest rises and falls. Or you may even turn your awareness to the sensation of air as it moves in your nose and out your mouth. Repeat this breathing cycle several times for a minute or so. If you're feeling calmer, consider taking a few more minutes to take a few more mindful breaths. Engage in this practice for as long as you're comfortable. And there are many strategies for learning deep breathing techniques. One that may be helpful is called box breathing. And to practice this technique, you are simply going to trace a box in the air with your finger as you're taking breaths in, holding them, and then exhaling. So the idea here is that you'd want to draw the top of the box as you're inhaling slowly to a count of 4. You're going to hold that breath as you're coming down the side of the box for a count of 4. You're going to exhale the breath as you're going across the bottom of the box for a count of 4. And then you're going to hold that empty feeling as you're coming back up to the top of the box for a count of 4. If you're doing box breathing, that's something that you can repeat several different times. And also know that there are many resources available to help with deep breathing, including apps and even animated GIFs. Deep breathing techniques help to clear the mind, they help relax the body, and they can improve our focus. When we engage in deep breathing exercises regularly, It can promote feelings of calm and wellness while relieving stress. And to enhance your self-care routine and to support your mental well-being, set aside a few minutes each day to practice deep breathing. When we practice mindful breathing regularly, it can make it easier to do so in those stressful situations. So how will you cultivate mindfulness in your own life? How can you benefit from a deep breathing practice? Deep breathing is just one of the many ways to use mindfulness to promote mental wellness. Set aside time each day to take a few deep breaths and really notice your breathing. Relying on your own breath is just one way to improve your mental wellness. I hope you join us again for another moment for mental health.
Thank you for tuning into CUI's TV. We hope you enjoyed the show. This video can be accessed anytime on youtube.com. In the YouTube search bar, type in UPTV6 and look for their microphone logo. We hope you will join us again next week for more local, engaging content designed specifically for Champaign County older adults. Take care and stay safe.